Good evening. Welcome to the Ossining Village Board Work Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have to do it over again. We know it's there.
It's a really large flag.
All right. Pardon? Yes, we could do that. Well, this is an exciting meeting. So many new people at the table for our work session. And one face that we've been used to seeing for the last 6 months who's not at our work session today is Karen's not with us tonight, but don't worry, she didn't go very far. She'll be back again tomorrow at work. But welcome Maddie Sahach, this is your first Wednesday as our Assistant Village Manager. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
Delighted
Happy to join you.
Good. And Maddie is familiar to all of us from her years of work in the town, and she's certainly very familiar with how village board work sessions run. So she'll just be sitting, instead of outside, sitting in front of her computer watching the meeting, she's going to be at the table making this exciting event happen. If we'll start with any announcements from trustees.
So last night, Trustee Casada and I were participating in this very room in the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. And last night we had two gentlemen from Pattern for Progress that came and explained to us an overview document that they created that took the 5 requests for qualifications respondents, and they put it into a lot of really helpful graphs and charts and ways to evaluate them in an apples to apples way. From that evaluation, we had open conversation with the end goal of trying to figure out which 1 or 2 or 3 we would invite in for an interview. So there were 2 firms that we decided to interview in the next couple of weeks. One is...
Don't mention the names.
Nope. One is, and the other is, and those are them. There you go. I appreciate the feedback. And yeah, and that's where we are. So hopefully we'll be interviewing them soon. And there you go.
All right. Did you want to add on?
No,
that was your first.
That was my first
meeting
for this particular committee, and I was very excited. And obviously, it was a lot of information to take in. But yeah, so it's next couple of weeks we'll figure it out, the interview process, and we'll be announcing the person who's going to be helping us with this whole plan that we have for our village. And there's a couple of things that we have to coordinate with. Some stuff that's going on, and as soon as we'll be able to speak more in more detail with that, we definitely, we're gonna Omar and I will try to figure it out the best way to communicate that with the board and also to the community as well. So the main thing is the engagement for this whole process to be the more advanced that we have, and I think will be better for our community to get to what we would like to see going forward for the next 10 years at least. So, but yeah, thank you, Omar. That was very well put out there.
Almost too much.
Almost.
The one thing that I did want to mention with relation to the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee is we have 2 spots that we could fill with community members. So we have some old resumes or applications that we'll take a look at, but it is an opportunity if there's somebody else in the community who hadn't really been paying attention before or suddenly has an interest in it. If you want to have an interview, then please reach out to us right away. And I don't know if that's included on the list.
It's not, but I can add it.
Thank you, Jamie. What Jamie has just read my mind for the other half of that sentence was, when you go on the village website, you'll see there's a little icon that says Get Involved. If you click on that icon, you can learn about all of our boards and committees, and if there are availabilities in some of them, you can click that you might be interested in interviewing for one of those positions. And Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee it's not a permanent standing committee. It will only last until this process is completed. But if you're interested, then a couple of us will interview you. Probably Jamie will reach out to you, schedule a time for us to talk, and see about getting you on the schedule for these very thought-provoking meetings. And it really is, that's a committee that is truly an active working committee with a lot of input and help from staff to make sure that it's moving along in an effective way. So I look forward to interviewing a few more people, and we'll talk offline about some potential candidates. That's not the only committee that has a couple of spots. We did a lot of really terrific appointments last week, but I know we still have at least one spot on the Recreation Advisory Board, on the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council, on the Ossining Arts Project. And those are the big ones. So those are the big ones. So if you have any interest in those, please go to that Get Involved icon and let us know your information and tell us a little about yourself. I wanted to would you have things to update on? Anything to update on? Then I'll give you 2 calendar items, and I'm going to tell everybody about a really interesting meeting that we had right in this room yesterday. It is Mlk Weekend, and there are at least 2 events happening in Ossining this weekend. The first is the Cooperative Scholarship fundraiser. The Cooperative Scholarship is, there's a handful of scholarships that are given out every year at the end of the year to Ossining students of color who are going on to college. And this is their big fundraising event. It happens at 3 o'clock at the Ossining High School. I believe tickets are $30 for the show, and then there's a meal afterwards. So I look forward to seeing many of my colleagues there, and hopefully many folks from the community as well. It's always well attended and should be a fun event. Then on Sunday evening at 7:30?
7:30.
Thank you. 7:30 at Star Bethlehem Church is the annual Briarcliff Ossining Ministerial Association service honoring the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And this year we have a special visitor, a speaker from Ireland, and
Ireland,
I don't
yeah.
have his name on me, about reconciliation and renewal. So please do join us for that service. It's an ecumenical service. The whole community is encouraged to join us. And there will be representatives from many of the houses of worship throughout Ossining. And so the meeting that happened here yesterday was the next phase of what can we learn from the Cornell graduate students who used us as their case study last semester. If you were one of the folks who joined us on, I think it was December 4th when they came and did their final presentations, or maybe I know Trustee Quesada is somebody who's had a chance to look at the video. The video is on our YouTube channel from several of the presentations that were there. And the follow-up meeting we had yesterday included the village, the town. One of the organizers of the group is the Hudson Estuary Program, which is a non-regulatory arm of the DEC. We had Metro North there. In fact, we had 2 representatives from Metro North, which was really helpful. Both the engineering and the planning were there. Senator Colucci's office had a representative. The Sing Sing Prison Museum, because that's one of the hopefully one of the institutions that is going to be that is going to be opening up on the waterfront and would be so directly impacted by the climate change impact that we are learning about more in depth thanks to the Cornell study. Riverkeeper was here, and County Legislator Borges' office was here. It was more of an in-depth discussion about what do we do from here with the information that we have about what the impact is going to be, and the proposals from 11 of the students. We looked in depth at 6 of them as an opportunity for discussion about, well, now that we know this, what do we do? How does this impact our comprehensive planning for the waterfront? And how do we then discuss this with other communities on the Hudson River? Because if we're the only ones who are proactively addressing this, but none of our neighbors are, then really it doesn't make a difference at all. We'll still have the same overall impact. So next week, we have a meeting, and let's see if I can remember, with the group that is, you were there, Maddie, right? Remember what the name of the group is that we're meeting next week?
Oh, goodness, I do not.
Okay, it's about the potential for a one-day workshop. And is it the Flood Resilience Network?
It's the Community Resilience Building,
Okay,
and it's with,
thank you, Jamie.
it's with the Village of Ossining, the Town of Ossining, Village of Briarcliff, and Mount Pleasant.
Okay. And so that would be planning a one-day workshop with, all right. Well, hopefully that'll be a good next step. And we'll see what we can make of it. We were really fortunate to have been selected to have been studied in this way. And so it's my hope that we really make good use of it. And it's a good timing since the village is updating our comprehensive plan and the town is redoing theirs as well. I think those are the big highlights. Madam Assistant Manager.
Okay, thank you. So the first item on the work session agenda this evening, I'm going to invite Village Engineer Paul Fraioli and Water Superintendent Andy Teese to join us to discuss the Operations Center rehabilitation, which the board is aware and the community is probably aware as well. This has been a project that has seen a couple iterations thus far, and these gentlemen have been critical in sort of managing the evolution of the process. And I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, so thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Board, Mayor. So this evening, I'm going to start with an apology that I do not have the consultant that we're working with presently to do the presentation that we would hope to bring to you this evening. We're still working on some of the details on his proposal, but since I am here for this and for other agenda items, I think to benefit the new trustees and also to serve as a recap, since this project has been back and forth in front of you so many times, I might want to do a chronological recap of this project and where we are today. Because I do anticipate coming back within a month with an actual proposal for resolution consideration and then design of that project. So in 2016, when this concept was first formally brought to the board for capital consideration, it was the genesis behind the project was an elevator in the operations center to make the most beneficial use out of the 3 floors that we have in that building. We knew there was some other work that needed to be done while we were there, so we decided to create a capital project to do an elevator and a roof, and then some miscellaneous work that would fall out of those 2 scopes, if you will. Remediation, some work based on the impact of the elevator to some of the facilities, more specifically to bathrooms, based on the location of the potential elevator, et cetera, et cetera. So we commenced with a consulting contract at that time. All along, we're also going through some internal personnel changes and management changes. So as we embarked on that project, we started incorporating what was happening at the operations center, again, more specifically with the planning and building department and some of those hirings and some of the logistics of how they run their operation, and then some of the logistics of how the board wanted to see that building used with respect to public usage. And essentially the project went from an elevator, 3-stop elevator project with a new roof replacement, a significant roof replacement. I think it's over 30,000 square feet. It's a large roof shed, and it's not shingle. It's a built-up rubber roof, and it has probably some asbestos tar in it and what have you. So there's it's an expensive roof job. Nonetheless, it went from those 2 main focuses to flipping the planning and building department to come down to the 1st floor, bringing Department of Public Works upstairs, creating a new boardroom, doing significant work in central garage, more than just the ventilation system for the exhaust of the vehicles that we were looking to do for safety measures for the mechanics, and new bathrooms, new windows, new flooring, new painting, lots of partition work, and essentially creating office space out of what's the existing planning and zoning board meetings downstairs and bringing a whole new boardroom upstairs with technology to go with it. So obviously the scope increased from a budget perspective about 3- or 4-fold. It went from a $3 to $4 million project, which was the original request, to about an $8 to $9 million estimate. At that point, it was scrapped. It was resurrected during our 2019 capital presentation to you all as again, we're going to look at this project, but we're going to go back to the original scope, which is one elevator and a new roof, and then some miscellaneous work that needs to be done on the 1st floor bathroom. That would still make everything accessible for all 3 floors. It would give us the operation budget ability, in other words, in-house ability to make better beneficial use of those spaces and give us time to make those changes as they go during the operating budget instead of making it part of the capital plan. We would get rid of the roof issue. The roof is very porous, especially over central garage. We go through a lot of issues there during heavy rain with water. So we're looking to solve that problem, and then we could also deal with what we believe is probably going to be some asbestos tar and then some asbestos tiles that we're going to encounter when we do some of the demo necessary for the elevator. We're looking at it on a much pared down scope. We're looking at doing the elevator as an appendage to the building to limit the, as best as we can, the interruption to the operations of the staff there on a day-to-day basis. So we can do this project while everybody else is working in place with very limited public or planning, building, or public works employee interruption. So we'll limit the service interruptions that we have there and the work interruptions. And that's the new scope, all back to our original budget of $3 to $4 million. And dare I say on the low end of that, because we're really trying to be very tight, because we heard the board loud and clear when we came back with the last presentation. It really serves as an update. I won't be asking you for a resolution to go forward with the same as far from a budget perspective, and I think Dale's going to get into that a little bit later when she does her, and I'll be here for that when we talk about capital project budget. The only resolution I'll be asking for is a resolution for a consultant going forward, which I'll bring again within the next month. And once I get that in place, we'll go forward. Because presently there is, in the existing capital project, which you created in 16 into 17, there's still in excess of $305,000 that was there for the original consultant. Again, serving as a recap, the original consultant did some work, created basically concept plans for a lot of the things that we were going to do in the larger project, but out of that we pulled the roof and the elevator plans, and we own them. We closed out their contract, closed the purchase order, put the money back into the capital project, and there's more than enough money in the capital project to retain this consultant turnkey from the finishing the design, bid documents, construction documents rather, and construction services during that effort, and any sub-consultants that might come out of that for remediation specialty consultants or testing consultants that go along with projects like this. So the only thing we'll really ask for is we're going to bid it, and then we're going to come and figure out how much debt we need for the completion of the project. So based on that, do I need to clarify anything further, or have any questions from the board regarding the new old scope?
I would welcome any questions. I'm sure that people just want to understand it better at this stage, since you're not asking for anything in particular.
Not really. I mean, the roof, I mean, I'm big on being green, you know, and that's, like I say, it's a lot of square footage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was ever approached as far as maybe putting some solar up on that roof.
Yep. I can go ahead. If that
No,
was.
that was basically all I had.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I did leave it off. One of the things that we're trying to incorporate in the project is, after we do complete the roof and we get some more details on its structural integrity, we are concurrently, we have one, and maybe we're going to solicit more, have a proposal from the original time we were embarking on this, from a solar company to lease the roof shed
Right.
for that building and the rear building, versus us putting the solar in as a homeowner would do and try to use the stored power in our building. It really doesn't make financial sense because of the rate that municipalities pay. I think it's about 18 cents per kilowatt right now is the municipal rate. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody else knows. But that's probably a third to almost maybe more than what a homeowner would pay. So we thought it would be more beneficial to just take a straight lease payment with limited obligation, make sure the appropriate insurances are in place from a contractor that would do such a thing, and basically just collect the cash payment as a landlord for the roof shed. And Stuart and I have to resurrect that conversation, but we did talk about it last about a year ago, so we have to get those documents going again. And we will, but the roof has to get done first. But you're right, we don't want to get the roof done until we know if there's going to be any potential penetrations for the dunnage or what
Right.
goes with these solar panels.
Yeah.
And that technology is always changing, so we have to really, it really has to be timed appropriately.
All right, good.
Since you brought that up, you'll be re-embarking on this in a new way and getting more information from new solar providers. I would encourage you to make sure that Sustainable Westchester is one of the groups that you reach out to get some input on what would be a solar, option for us to consider.
Will do. Thank you.
Anyone else with questions for Paul about this topic? Yeah, please, Omar.
So first, thanks for the overview, super helpful. So the way I captured it, 2016 was the original proposal, and then 2019 with now the redux of the original proposal. Did anything happen in 2017 or 2018?
2017 and 18 was really a period where the project, I'll call it blossomed. We were going through the design, but the design kept taking on a different life because there was, new ideas in how we were gonna, how we were gonna program the building, if you will. So basically, the end result was flip-flopping departments to better serve the public who come into planning and zoning often and building often. They come into public works too, but not as often. And then creating a separate formal state-of-the-art media / conference room up there was something else that was put into the scope, because our planning and zoning meetings can get crowded, and it's busy. It's a busy department, as Stuart can attest to. Those meetings are sometimes highly attended and do have state-of-the-art presentations that we want to facilitate for architects when they come in and present to the planning and zoning board and such. And it could also be a spillover meeting place for you all or anybody else that needs to meet when there's something going on here concurrently.
But now the vision is not to do that.
Well, I don't think the vision, it's a little crude right now, the plan, but basically once we get the elevator in place, we can take care of a lot of the grunt work, if you will, bringing a lot of the files and old long-term storage down into the basement, right, and clear out that room, and then kind of think of it then. Possibly if we put enough things in one bag, we can make another capital project out of it, but we do have some pretty handy folks here and could probably make some decent office space out of it if office space turns out to be the need at the time. So we're not going to do anything hasty, but the main, the meat and potatoes of the project is back to where we are again, the elevator and the roof.
And if I am a resident that does not have a vehicle, is there any way for me to get there that doesn't involve private transportation?
People have walked through Vets Park to get there. There's gates and there's a path from the field. There's not a formal sidewalk, if you will, that runs through Vets Park, but it's definitely easy to navigate when you don't have a ton of snow on the ground and what have you. But yeah.
I only ask that because I'm mindful of the fact that there are folks who might want to use this facility that don't have vehicles, and so that is helpful to note. And last for me...
May I interject this before you finish that?
Sure.
So a lot of residents come in for things that are somewhat mundane, and we try to offer that in other buildings. For example, mattress bags. From a DPW perspective, mattress bags and the organic waste bags are available at the Recreation Center, and we advertise that on our website and on our newsletter, so they can go there for that. Much of our documents, like a street opening permit and what have you, and the solid waste newsletter and things that you might want to come in and say, I need a copy of when to throw my garbage out. A lot of that's online. I know building department and planning department have tons of documents online that would be a prerequisite to coming in and having a meeting or anything like that. And that's even, that they're even expanding that further with information desks, computers. So, we're understood. And a lot of things we're trying to prevent you having to come there for something as mundane as that. Yeah, because it is not convenient to get to.
Yeah. Are there any trade-offs to having the elevator be constructed externally?
It's really that you're not really interrupting the space that you have now. And it's tight. And there's a lot of people that work out of that building, and there's a lot of public that go in and out of there. And it also allows us to do the construction with limited interruption while the day-to-day is going on during construction.
But it isn't more vulnerable to weather or...
No, it's still going to be a bricks and mortar. Once you're done, it's going to look like it's not going to look like a standalone appendage. It'll be done in a way that it looks like it was a shaft that was done contiguous and similar in aesthetic to the existing building.
Got it. And lastly, how does this project, so one of the things I'm trying to get a sense of is in terms of project management, we have the water treatment center and all kinds of things that are happening. How does this fit in to the bigger picture of capital projects and in terms of your capacity or your team's capacity to kind of oversee what's happening?
From a financial perspective, I'll defer to finance to talk about the debt service because every time we borrow, we also retire debt. So that's balanced pretty well where we have as limited impact as possible to the debt service's impact on the tax rate because a lot of these projects, not the one you're going to talk about with Andy, the water project, that's a ratepayer funded capital project, but the tax funded projects are we spread them out as best as we can. The building borrows typically tend to be, and again, I'll let Dale kick me if I say this wrong, but the building projects tend to be like 40-year bonds and long-term bonds, so it's very negligible, as opposed to like
Getting a little head shake back there.
Ken, sometimes. Okay, 39 years. 20.
20, yeah.
So, yeah,
That's
that's it. And as far as the capital administration, we have a good team, but it's not just up there. Capital administration really is depending on the project, is really integral with finance down here, manager's office down here. Everything has a component, and we all work pretty well together at it. And as far as the workload, I talk about this with Manager DeTore because there are a lot of things on the plate. It's not just the plant and the building. There's, the paving that we're going to do some transfer ins to move some money into the rolling 2020 capital paving project. There is, yes, the tank project, which was just open. Water main work. We're doing remediation work on hopefully the bank with the clock coming up. A lot of it's in design phase, a lot of it's in construction phase, and depending on the phase, that's also depends on where your time goes too. Right now in the design phase, a lot of the work is administration, but a lot of the time-consuming work is with the consultants. When it gets into construction, you're right, it gets a little hairy. You got to bounce and bounce and bounce, but at that time we try to supplement with retained inspectors and what have you, and people to assist us on that end. Because just like anything else, you don't want to load up on in-house personnel for the hot times like the next 3 or 4 years, and then if it does simmer down or you cut way back, do you really need to carry that administrative load?
Right.
It's a tough call, but it's a balance. But yes, thank you for your concern, I guess. Yeah.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Manny, come on, you've been so patient. This is your project. Tell us what do you want to ask Paul?
So I'm not really going to ask anything because we had a conversation earlier today, some of the stuff, that coordination and everything. But I do want to just put 2 cents on this whole project, and it's not a 2016 project. This is actually a 2007 project. And actually, that's the first time, formally I met Paul at that time, with a previous firm that I was working on it, and my boss at that time was calling to look at this particular project in there. So this project is since 2007, probably even before that. When I became part of the village board, that's something that I was pushing to see. If people go to this facility, it's just a little bit of background, there's an ADA ramp, but there's no ADA accessibility to the rest of the building. So that was one of the main concerns that I had. And years later, after being in the board, I had the full support of the board to bring this back into reality, to actually being a capital project and kind of move forward from there. So I've been very patient. I took a year off, 2018. That's when things changed a little bit on the scope of the work. When I came back 2019, I kind of had another sit down with Paul, Andy, and kind of go back to what the whole concept of this is to make this building accessible to the public, and go from there. I think there's a lot of potentials for this going forward. There's a lot of components that go to this, because there's we have a great basement level or cellar level that is not very accessible to a lot of the stuff that we would like to accomplish. So by putting the elevator, will help a lot, especially in this building, because a lot of the files have, just give me a little bit more depth of conversation. I can give you more. I can be here all night talking about this particular project. But anyway, so I'm waiting patiently. So hopefully it won't take another year to get this thing done. So at least the design part and the construction documents. If you go back to our capital project part, construction's supposed to start 2021.
Yeah.
So I want to accomplish the construction drawings. So we have a year to accomplish the construction drawings, go out to bid, and hopefully start January 1st, 2021. We start excavation.
That's where we're at. And again, the as far as spreading out the work, this is anticipated to be designed this year, construction next year, roughly. Same thing, paving, there is no design. That's all done in-house, and we'll bring forth, my druthers to the board with the budget, within the budget that is in place right now, that Dale's going to talk about, as far as which roads and what road work we're looking to do. So that won't be design, that will be actual field work. There is the CDBG grant that we received, which we put in for more money. I think last time I was here, I said it was $250, but we put in for $500. So that will be coming back to us for design this year, and it's a 2021. It's in the 2020 to 2022 cycle, so that's a 2021 approved project. And there is a multimodal grant, which we applied for, that you'll see on the transfer tonight. That is also something that doesn't require design, that if we get that money approved from DOT through Assemblywoman Galis' office, we will get $150,000 for Broad Avenue, which is something that we put off, if you guys remember, because of the Con Ed work. So the silver lining in that delay was that we put it in as a multimodal project and might get the whole thing paid for. There is some work that I think Andy's going to talk about, so I don't want to steal the water show there either. But then the 200 Main is also something that through a grant is anticipated to be designed this year and bid and remediated next year. So we're in that phase where we're doing a lot of consultant work, but then once it starts, then it's going to get busy for sure.
I just, sometimes I think things take a long time because people say government works slowly. I just don't think that's what this project is. It's, it's changed a bit because we took a tour, all the trustees, and I think you guys may want to do it. We went up on the roof. We walked out there. We looked at the whole thing, and you walk in this building. It was a military
Old armory, yeah.
Right, an armory, which is why it's located. It was donated. I mean, the taxpayers didn't pay for it originally, although there's always a cost. So there are pros and cons. You get very excited. You're like, oh man, we can build
don't do that
conference
ever again.
rooms, and
Never accept a building.
Well, that's one of the things we learned is don't accept any more real estate like that. But the truth is, we had these visions, and so we asked for a lot, and also for the employees that work there. There's an operations center, and then you sort of go back and say, wow, it's not as accessible like to the community, but that may not be a bad thing because, do you really want to build a big building like that in the middle of a residential area? I mean, there were all these pros, and it's the pros and cons and different points of view that delayed the project. Retrospect, it's a good thing we didn't go with the original plan. I mean, first of all, technology has changed, so we would have to retrofit everything. How you want to use the building is what it all comes down to. Is it for meetings? There are fewer and fewer places left in this village with an increase in population and density where people and groups can have meetings. And restaurants are expensive to have meetings in, right? So it's like, how do you want to use a building? And it's changed as well. And also the storage of years and years and years of records. Where can it sit? And how do you manage that? So I'm not upset that it took longer, and I'm not upset that it's changed a while. I think other people are upset, but that's okay. But I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not like other projects. I think it's for the best that it took a little bit longer, and I'm glad. And I do think that you guys, the two of you, I don't know if you've been there. I just wanted to point out that while the solar thing is I'm glad Bob's with me on this. You know, I have it in my own house. I love it. I drive electric. This is great stuff. But I did actually just come back from Florida, and I'm amazed at how little they use solar on roofs. But it turns out actually that they use tiles now when they build homes, so they don't need that anymore. Just food for thought. Windows that are solar, so they don't need to have those things on top. They also use computer-generated angled structures. So it captures the sun because it rotates with the sun depending on the time of the year, rather than putting them on rooftops when there's room. So I think there are lots of options. So I'm glad you mentioned. Like, I think we have the opportunity to revisit the whole solar thing and do well with it. And if we can't do solar, because there was a reason, I thought I remembered why we weren't able to, right? We went on that roof and there was a reason why solar wasn't going to work.
Well, some
on
of them.
there.
It all depends on your
The angles.
your exposure.
Right.
We actually we started talking. We have a full front lawn, right? That is within our property line. It's out of
Right.
the DOT right away on 9A South.
Right.
That we were pondering some angle type units that you were talking about on the front lawn, and then keep it away from the roof. But again,
You're going to
it's-
look into it.
Yeah, it's
The
definitely
only
on the-
other option I would suggest, again, from my recent trip, which I learned, and honestly, you could, there are people who have expertise, is if you can't do solar, which would be ideal because it brings back energy, and you've heard me talk about this, is green roofs. That actually is a roof that's very, and they're building them all over Brooklyn on a lot of the old buildings like this one, not the new ones, that have pros and cons. And just so the public understands it, it doesn't mean we're gardening up there. People aren't going up and down, and, you know, it's actually a green roof for the purpose of energy.
Well, on our plant too, right? So we have a
what
we have
we
a green
talked
roof on
about that, yeah.
our water plant, and the benefit there was is they're basically designed to capture and treat
Right.
rainwater. It also, as a collateral benefit, you decrease the amount of treatment and retention that you have to have outside once you collect it underground, which allowed us to build the building and clear less of the woodland that we would
Right.
have to clear if we were going to do all that detention. It's a very large roof shed. So now we're collecting it as part of a green roof / rain garden. It will get treated through the root system and then discharged, and which eventually makes its way down to the Croton River, which is tributary to the Hudson. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, so this is, I'm excited about it, although I know it's taken a while, but.
I'm glad you mentioned the green roof, and that's one of our big projects that we're very excited about, and we're glad that New York State recognized that it was a project worthy of, I think that was the one that actually got the priority project status. The others were just regionally significant in their assessment by the New York State recently and all of the grants. But I did want to, before we close out this topic of conversation, because we talked about, you know, one of the driving forces for this is greater accessibility through the building. We do have the ramp. There's, if somebody is there and they're not able to walk up the stairs, they can, or open the door themselves. There is a button, right, to be able to push the door, or is it just a
Well, it's
door?
not now, but part of this
Just a door.
part of this project is going to be the existing doors now, the old, very large and heavy stainless steel doors. They are beautiful, but
Yeah.
we're probably going to lose the center ones to accommodate ADA accessibility to the first floor and the elevator.
There's options.
They're
to that.
actually gorgeous.
We're talking about how we can work around that.
Yeah, 'cause
But
they're kind of cool doors.
Yeah.
But my real question was, so if I arrive at that building right now, what do I experience if I'm in a wheelchair, and why is it okay? I mean, I know legally it's not a problem for us to have this, but we just feel that it would be better to be more accessible for everybody in the community. And I don't know if this is a legal question or if you're just versed enough in it that you.
well, I could say that the reason we I believe we purchased the building. I don't know if it was gifted to
Is
us.
that true? Oh, I thought it
Yeah,
was. Okay.
yeah, it was
I didn't know.
back in the late '90s, mid '90s maybe.
Really?
And it really acted as our new location for DPW yard, which was on Water Street, because we needed a new facility after the hurricane back then in the late '90s, right?
The old is new again.
Anyway, so it was a pre-existing, non-conforming use, and based on the usage, code does not dictate that we have to have an elevator in there. But because of what the building has become, we're moving along with this project, yeah.
So if somebody arrives there now and they're not able to open the door themselves, they ring a doorbell?
There is a doorbell, and obviously our window faces the main path, and we're very aware of the coming and going into the either up the ramp or up the steps, and we accommodate people.
So staff comes,
Often.
opens the door, welcomes them in, and if they want to talk to planning and building that's upstairs, then planning and building comes to them, and they meet in one of the meeting rooms
That does
downstairs.
happen a lot, yeah.
I just wanted people at home to know that it's not that the building is inaccessible, it's just not accessible in the way that we would like it to be, ideally.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Next up, it's the Public Works show. So, Maddie, do you want to give an intro?
Sure. So Superintendent Andy Teese is going to be joining us to give an update on some of the water issues that their department has been so good about communicating with the community about. And
Good evening, Mayor and Board. I have with us tonight Stephen Ho. He is our Chief Operator. He'll talk after I'm done, but I'll try not to make it too long. But we have so much going on. So everybody's aware that we had water quality issues, MIB levels that were above where people can detect them. An average person can detect an MIB level above 5 parts per trillion. We had 100 parts per trillion. We received calls about a month ago, and once in a while we'll get a water quality taste and odor issue, maybe like 3 or 4 a year, but it became like once a week, then it became like once every 2 days, and then it was like every day, and then 2 a day, and we realized, this is real. It's so we started to do investigations. We tested for iron and manganese. We tested for what we normally test for. Immediately, we called New York City, and we wanted to find out what the status was of what they were treating. And at that point, they got back to us the next day and said that they had shut down their filtration plant in the Bronx that was built 8 years ago because of water quality complaints. So then immediately we went and we Googled New York City water complaints, and you could see there was a lot from the Croton system in the city. So we realized it was the Croton system. So we needed to get authorization from New York City on their sample results, which we're meeting with them this Friday. But in the meantime, we wanted to rule out our Indian Brook water was better quality than New York City water. So we consulted with Kirk Nowak, one of the leading scientists in the country from Arcadis, and he explained to us what we needed to test for. There's usually two primarily algae that cause this. One is MIB, and the other is geosmin? Geosmin. And it was found to be the MIB. The silver lining is it can be treated. Now, New York City shut their filtration plant down at that point, which was a $3 billion investment, so it's a big deal. And the reason why New York City was on this Croton system, and normally they're on the Delaware system and they're on the Catskill system, is they had their aqueducts shut down for maintenance. So there were 2 communities that were forced to go on this. We're the only ones that are on the old Croton aqueduct, and Newcastle is on the new Croton aqueduct, but it still feeds from the same water source. So we immediately called Newcastle, and they were having a little bit less calls than us, but we wanted to investigate that, and we let them know right away our MIB levels were high. And they have a treatment there, an ozone system treatment, that they increased the dose, and they were able to bring the calls down, and they still are above that limit of 5, and they're still getting calls. We are not getting calls now because we are less than 1 from our Indian Brook water. So first of all, big thanks to the prior board members from years ago that allowed us to spend $6 million on the rehabilitation of the dam and the reservoir, because now we can take water from different levels based on stratification, based on water quality, and that's what's getting us through this time. Right now, the reservoir is close to 2 feet below the spillway at a 40 feet. We think we can draw down to about 20 to 15 feet. So time is of the essence, and that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about, like what we're doing here. So last week we met with Arcadis and told them we need their help to start designing a system, systematically looking at how do we treat these levels of MIB. And Steve grabbed 5-gallon pails of water. He shipped them down to Florida, and we have a lab there that's actually doing jar tests, and they're trying different powder activated carbons to see what's the most effective. And once we find out what's the most effective and how many pounds per day needs to be fed into our system, which it's going to be fed at the head of the plant, powder activated carbon is adsorption. So what that means is it'll absorb the taste and odors, and it's very effective. So in the meantime, they are getting the results from that. And once we get the results, hopefully beginning of next week, we'll be able to size the equipment appropriately that either we're going to lease or we're going to purchase. And we need to procure that as soon as possible, that agreement, so that once it shows up, we can start piping and installing it in-house. We'll do everything other than the high voltage electric, but we'll be piping it with our distribution people, our SCADA, in-house workers. SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. So you put this huge 16-foot piece of equipment that's that high, and it has, imagine, large bags of powder-activated carbon that slowly gets fed into the system. It has to be flow-paced. So as the flow of the plant picks up, the speed of the pump picks up. So it feeds it, and it's very accurate. So like all this is being coordinated at the same time as the design, because we don't want to waste days here. We're also looking at the new plant because there's other systems out there. Like the new plant will have UV reactors for disinfection along with chlorine, liquid chlorine. But in recent years, they found that if you add peroxide with UV reactors, it totally destroys down to like 5% of MIB. So if it's a matter of adding a reactor while we're still in the final design stage of the plant with some peroxide and not have all these bags being brought into the plant, we're going to look at we want Arcadis to look at both systems. But obviously the priority right now is the existing plant. And so I don't want to lose time on the new plant design either. Also, being that isn't, we add potassium permanganate, which oxidizes iron and manganese out at the filtration plant. You cannot add powder activated carbon and the potassium permanganate at the same location because it'll just eat up the permanganate. So what we're thinking of is adding it closer to the dam, meeting with New York City this Friday, possibly up in the aqueduct. And the aqueduct, which we are the only ones on, is above the aqueduct itself, is owned by the New York State Parks. We reached out for Linda Cooper, who's in charge of the New York State Parks. She sent up an engineer yesterday. We met with them on site. So we're looking at meets and bounds. We're looking at the logistics of it. So there's a lot that we're working on at one time so we don't lose valuable time. As far as water quality calls, I want Steve to answer that because he's been really proactive meeting with the residents and following up. But before I get that far, do you guys have any more questions? Oh, so not only the equipment itself is $200,000. So this is specialized equipment. It's that kind of money. We're waiting for the proposal from Arcadis to do the design of this equipment and look at the design of the new plant and help us with these approvals. So that's key, along with the procurement of the equipment. That's it for that. I'm going to talk about the tanks after, but let Steve talk about.
Can I just make sure I understand when you're talking about the $200,000 equipment, that's for
Existing
adding
plant.
to the existing plant?
Correct.
So that if this is going to be an ongoing or repeating condition, people won't, there won't be we won't experience the same taste and odor because this new
Correct.
system, which sound like, how different is what you're describing to like the charcoal filter I have at home? Obviously on a slightly larger scale.
Obviously, it's more material. Right now the calculations are 400 pounds per day for about 3.5 million gallons. So I don't know how much material's in your little charcoal filter, but with MIB levels of 100, and some of the people were using the Brita filters, which has the powder activated carbon in, it wasn't helping much. So it's based on your demand and your dosage.
Okay.
But it's essentially the same idea.
Okay.
so like timing is everything with this, and we're just moving fast. I want Steve to answer about.
I just want to understand the $200,000 piece of equipment that we'll be using in our existing plant. Is that piece of equipment then something that will be transferred to our new one? And
If
how
we
long?
can, and that's the thing. Like, we have about probably a month to 5 weeks to get everything up and going. Without being an alarmist, I think we can do it. But the issue is, so if it's a $7,000 a month rental agreement, and we're spending $80,000 a year, and we know the new filtration plant won't be built for 3 years.
That was my next question.
So do we buy it or not? But immediately, if we have to do a rental agreement for a couple of months while another one gets built and we use it and it fits into the new filtration plant, we're looking at every avenue because we don't want to waste money.
Okay.
But we know we're going to need it, and we've been testing the New York City water like twice a week, and we've been using the Newcastle plant because they're feeding off that system right now, and we're not. So if we were to take any numbers out of our aqueduct, it wouldn't be accurate. And from what we see, the numbers haven't changed. So it's still 100. We just got the results this morning.
And we need to be less than 5 for people to not taste it. So that's
Exactly. So it's although New York City said their number yesterday was 66. So is it old water that's in the aqueduct because it's Newcastle? It takes a while to get to Newcastle. So we're gonna meet with them, understand their sampling plan, understand their communication, and how we could better work together because we are their customer. It's just like we have customers.
Yeah, go ahead. It's okay. Pause it. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Andy. The lease or buy kind of caught my ear because, let's face it, the new plant's 2 years away. And, excuse me, if we buy it, which I don't think would be smart at this point because technology changes in 2 years, it could go to 200 pounds. You never know. So the lease option sounds like a smart option because if I understand you correctly, we depend on the Croton Reservoir. Indian Brook is our backup.
Correct. The normally in a normal year we take 30% from our own reservoir and 70 from New York City.
All right. That was basically it. I just trying to make sense out of the leasing. Might be the smart way to go until we get the plant built, and then at that time it could be a newer piece of equipment.
Yeah, we'll do the numbers, and like I said, it's kind of premature because it all depends on detention time. Detention time is the amount of time it takes for a drop of water to get from here to here. In the existing plant, it takes 45 minutes to get to where it should get to in the existing plant. The new plant, it's 12 minutes. So like you said, that system might not work because it's,
Right.
It's a quarter of the time.
Yep.
So we do know that we want to use the existing infrastructure that's Hazen and Sawyer's designed in the basement for the UV, and it's useful information for this ozone system that Newcastle has because we don't have to pay for engineering. We have that information and we could say, okay, this makes sense or this doesn't. It is a small footprint and we don't really have much room to add ozone. So it's like, I'm hoping the UV works because we'll use less powder activated carbon, but we will definitely be using powder activated carbon in the new plant too. It's just I don't know the dose with the UV.
That's all I have.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate the input. So I just have like a general question on here. What is New York City doing for us?
Well, we'll find out Friday.
What does that mean, though?
What are they doing for us? Well, we're going to meet with them, take a tour of their facility, take a tour of their gatehouse, take a tour of their dam, look at their infrastructure, and see how they could help us in the future. Because we would like to inject potassium permanganate up there, and we need to have. We had to go through the authorization process to get their samples, so we want to get their sampling plan. We need to get their information faster, so we don't lose a couple of weeks in delays. So it's a communication thing, and I think they're willing to work with us and get us information faster. That's what we need, information faster,
So
because we lose valuable time filling the aqueduct.
correct.
Is that your question?
Part of it.
Oh,
So
I didn't think that was a
so,
question.
so no, not quite, but we provide water to the town of Ossining, sure. And if a break happens in the town of Ossining, the village of Ossining does the repair, because we are receiving money from the town of Ossining, so pretty much we own the water part. So in a way, I'm looking at this in a little bit bigger picture. We're buying the water from New York City. If we're buying something, if we're paying for something, for the quality of the water that we're paying for, why is it not New York City responsible to do the repairs necessary for us to keep buying the quality water that we are supposed to be receiving? So that's the real question to me. What is New York City doing for us on this? Because we pay for the water.
We'll ask them, because I know, like, New York City has funded projects where municipalities were taken offline for aqueduct shutdowns, and to benefit them. So it's a good question. We'll ask them.
I mean, if we have to spend $200,000 or lease something, we're paying for something that we may not even be able to reuse in a new plant. So to me, it's like, I'm not saying wasting taxpayers' money.
I get it.
But I don't want to spend something if we're paying for something else.
Yeah, exactly. And it honestly, the Delaware water is the most superior. Then comes the Catskill. Then comes the Croton. Croton has more population around it. There's golf courses. There's more nutrients in the water. There's more algae blooms. So it's a harder water to treat. The operational cost, more chemicals for us, more sludge production. Last week I looked at the availability of the Catskill and what it would take to get it to the old aqueduct. And it's a huge secret process that Paul was telling me about. And it's, a minimum of $10 million to get another water source to our aqueduct that it might pay 10, 15 years down the road to have that redundancy, or you say, you know what, Croton's our backup and Catskill is the premier water we want to feed Ossining. But that's like agreements. That's when the aqueducts were built in the early, late 1800s and early 1900s, the communities only had one chance to tap into that aqueduct. And this is an aqueduct that is in another town, but yet it's owned by New York City. And these are questions I'm going to ask, because we're not just going to say in our minds, we're just stuck with Croton water. We're going to look at what other avenues are there.
And I know time is an essence, but at the same time, it's like, look, if we're going to agree to do something with this, I want to make sure is New York City is supposed to be our partner. And if they're not bringing it to the table, it's not really a partnership that we're having.
I'd really like to hear what his experiences, but before he comes up, I just want to, Newcastle, they're on Croton Reservoir?
They're on the Croton system right now. And in about 2 weeks, they'll be back on the Catskill.
So they're connected to both.
They're connected to both. And they primarily use the Catskill that runs through Millwood.
We have the ability to access water from Newcastle.
We can only access about 500,000 gallons a day of purchased water. And right now, even with our reservoir going down, our water quality is better than theirs. So
no, I'm just wondering.
So it doesn't pay at this point.
That $10 million price. But anyway, that's an offline conversation. We don't have to figure that out tonight.
That's treated water. That's
okay. Thank you. And Briarcliff?
That's just agreements that need to take place.
Where do they get their water from?
They get their water from down at the UV plant down in Valhalla. And it goes through 3 different communities, and they share the pipeline, and there's a certain capacity. Right now, they're kind of maxed out because they're involved with this shutdown, and they can only take water from there right now. They can't.
So, I mean, we've had conversations over the years about the potential for having
we have
having
interconnections.
But that would only be for treated water as well?
Treated.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Now I understand.
And honestly, every 1,000,000 gallons we purchase off Newcastle would be over, right now, our raw water cost is about $1,800 per 1,000,000 gallons. 5 years ago, the number from Newcastle was like $10,000 per 1,000,000 gallons. So you're looking at an emergency, you do what you have to do, but if we were to purchase, half our water off Newcastle a day, it'd be 15,000 a day.
No, I wasn't suggesting that, now that I
Right.
understand it, thank you. All right, and do you want to?
Yeah,
Give a little
so I'm going to introduce you to Steve Ho, and he can fill in some of the blanks.
Okay. Thank you, Board, Mayor. We'll talk about the complaints. Right around Thanksgiving is when, right before New York started drawing from Croton, tremendous amount of water. We probably started getting some calls trickling in after Thanksgiving, but it wasn't, pretty far into December where there were multiple calls per day. And, to this day, I think I got one call Monday, but I think that was a outlier. So we got roughly about 100 calls during that period. It's a lot. Normally, we might get 5 calls a year for the same taste and odor, so something was going on. So, most people said taste and odor. It was widespread. I probably tested 20 to 30 people's water. It all came back the same. Passed every test, no bacteria. It's just this taste and odor component. So the water was safe to drink. Just wasn't, aesthetically pleasing. So as of Tuesday, we started calling these people back because their input's so important to us. That's how we know if we're on the right trail. And most of the people said it's getting better, so it's very encouraging. I think in the next week we should be through this totally. Any questions? Oh, one thing. Some of you have toured the plant. We love giving tours, Andy and Paul. If you haven't been there, we invite you to come up and get the tour. This will make a lot more sense to you, the technology and stuff. All right? Anything else?
Well, I just want to say thank you. I know you've been on the front line of dealing with a lot of concerns from community members, because the taste and odor, yes, is something to complain about, but it also makes people very concerned that it's not just taste and odor and what is really wrong with their water.
I find most people, if they have to, I'd say, do you have time? Because it's going to take me a little while to explain. When they hear it and they understand it, that, they're a little bit more tolerant. Plus, I always tell them to call back. Call us. You have to call us. That's the only way we know for sure besides testing. Okay, so they're all part of the solution. I was going to say part of the problem. Part of the solution, and their input's very important to us.
Steve, how long have you been with Ossining at the Indian Brook Water Treatment Facility?
Since 2005.
And my understanding is that this is the first time we've seen this condition at our filtration
The
plant.
very first time.
So why do you think it's happening now?
Well, what happened is the Croton system is New York City's emergency backup. They don't usually draw from there for their city, but they have this big project of replacing a part of the aqueduct that goes under the Hudson River that is leaking. This is like 10 years in the making. Mm-hmm. So they're preparing for that completion in a couple of years. So to replace the water that normally comes down the Catskill to parts of the Bronx and stuff, they started bringing Croton water to their new filter plant in the Bronx. It was a lot of water, 190 million gallons a day. We use 3 million gallons a day. That's like 2 of our Indian Brook reservoirs a day, drained to the bottom. So I think just the force of that water stirred up the reservoir, suspended a lot of the stuff that was on the bottom, and that's what, because we never have gotten this condition. It's very unique.
Interesting.
Very unique.
And they also have multiple shutdowns planned. So this isn't going to be the only time. But they realize that they need to design a PAC system too, and they're calling the same engineers that we're calling, powder activated carbon. So it's, Steve looked at the timelines, because originally I looked at it and said, oh, maybe it's seasonal, it's a bloom, it's been warm this year, and everything kind of relates to when they open that 190 million gallons to the city. And that's what, but we should probably get some final results this Friday. But one thing we asked was New York City, can you give us a baseline of the samples of what it's been previous years? Because we've never seen this, and they've never tested for it. So they're kind of in the same boat as us, like they didn't expect this to happen.
One thing, the importance of
Talking to the mic for the
the importance of the timeline to get this powdered activated carbon system in is we're relying 100% on Indian Brook Reservoir. This time of year, we usually have the most water from runoff and rain, but we're drawing 3 million gallons from there. The recharge is probably around 2 million, so it's going down, you know, a few inches every day. If we get heavy rain, that'll bump it up a little, so we're really dependent on the weather, which no one can predict. Secondly, Croton, we don't know how long it's going to take for that MIB to either settle down or flow out. Have no idea. Hopefully New York City could enlighten us with some of that information.
I'm very reassured that that this is something that you're planning for now with our new filtration plant, because while it's this particular project, that it seems that the cause of this is a particular project that forced New York City to draw more on the Croton system. There could be any number of reasons where it reminds us how interdependent all of us in this region are on our water supply, and how one shift in one area can impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of people in the region. So I guess it's a good thing that it happened when it did, rather than a year from now when the plant was already being built. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
Rika, you were leaning forward.
No, you know, I just going to echo Manny's words. You know, we're using different words. They're partners, we're their client, but at the end of the day, while unintended consequence, it is a consequence. So there's an opportunity here, and there's also an ask. So an opportunity is to make sure you're documenting all this as a case study, because there might be other regions in this country where the population is pretty large, right? Because we're a very urban country, and people should learn from this. You know, you guys have written articles before. It happened because a major project is going on in New York City that affects its surrounding suburban areas. And I think, like, we're always very good about educating colleagues around the country. In fact, I think, Steve, you oftentimes meet with people from this area and from other parts of the country. So I'd like us to take the opportunity for an education for other, I mean, why not? And you guys are good at this. The second one is, you know, while unintended consequences do occur, you know, we're still probably paying the same amount of money for water that, frankly, we either shouldn't be paying for and save the taxpayer some money. Your time has been taken up by this, so other things aren't getting done. That's my assumption. And the other piece of it is that whether they're partners or whether they're clients, you know, they should help us solve this. But if we have to lease something for X number of dollars because of an unintended consequence on their part as a project that they have been planning for 10 years, no blame, but at the end of the day, if the roles were reversed, I think somebody would be asking us to make them whole for it. I doubt there's an insurance policy we can take out for things like that, and I doubt you could take out an insurance policy after the fact, right? So once you have this, it's like an earthquake. Until you have an earthquake, everybody gives you insurance. Once you have an earthquake, you can't get an insurance company to insure anything because you've now become a place that has it. So I would just say that I hope the conversation goes well on Friday, but, you know, our job is to be on behalf of our constituents
Sure.
and the residents, and I just think that should also be part of the conversation.
One of the reasons for meeting Friday is to go up, you know, the New York City is going to have to deal with treating this water also. So, you know, we're both in the same boat,
Right.
so to speak. And, you know, the water is safe to drink. So, you know, they don't really guarantee the quality of water that they send down the aqueduct. You know, it could be a natural disaster, a hurricane could stir things up. We do see turbidity go
Right.
up. We might have to use a few more chemicals to treat it, but it's our business. It's our business to treat water.
No, I understand, and that's a great engineering response, but I think conversations need to be had, because what I'm also hearing you say is this project is still going on, an unintended consequence could happen again. Again, I don't think they intended this to happen at all. There is no finger pointing, and the water's safe. I've been drinking it, it's fine, you know, we all live here. But as somebody who represents the public, I just do want to say publicly that I hope that this conversation does take place as well, because it doesn't matter where, you know, at the end of the day, you know.
We will definitely ask, because we do spend $2 million a year as a customer. It's a lot of money. So, the other thing I wanted to bring up is, you could grab a seat. Thanks. Is
Steve,
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
is the tank project, right? You talk about unintended consequences that happen like this. We signed on with New York City with the water demand project, and we brought our leaks down from, like, normally this time of year it was like 3.2 we'd put out of the filtration plant. We're down to like 2.6. So that's a huge reduction, and that's a nice program that we signed on for. The unintended consequence is that now the water, instead of being in the distribution system for 8 days, now it's in the distribution for 10 days. And that's why we're putting that THM removal system out there that's going to cost us $1 million, so that we take care of any THM issues in the distribution system. So something so good can cause other consequences, and we're going to probably write a paper on that too. But the overall reduction of water being lost in the system is a big win for us. So, and the other big win is, as the mayor said, we didn't build this plant and
Yeah,
have to go
timing.
back for a $3 million change order because
Yeah.
this happened after, and it would have been bad. So,
I'm just going to say one thing, Paul. I started this trustee. Do you remember what you told me? Water is the biggest issue of the 21st century. It's going to be, anybody who wants a job should be going into that. If anybody in high school is listening to this, no kidding. All over the world, it's become, taking care of water, having enough of it, having it clean, has become like it's the next great place to have kids working at, because I think it's the future. You were right.
It's scary because there's a lot of, it's becoming a very privately held company dominated market,
Because it's a market.
and they're consolidating. And you know what happens after that. So that's why the other thing I say often is maintaining full operational control with
Yeah.
public employees is paramount with our own reservoirs.
So-
That keeps
We're going to have to repeat all this.
Paul just said something really important, but he didn't say it on mic.
I'm
so people
hoping
at home
parents
can't
with high school
can't hear
kids
it.
are listening.
Which no, I don't think that was off the record, but how important it is for us as a municipality to be able to maintain control of our water, and to, rather than having it become privatized, which is, we have seen happen in many
Right.
areas. But I just gave a very abbreviated version of it, if you want to.
Close enough.
I covered it. Yeah, it is incredibly important. I want to thank all three of you who work so hard to make sure that we have an incredibly valuable water system. And I don't think, I've attended a couple of the things where I've seen, I know, Steve, you're one of the organizers for the water. Well, yeah,
Westchester
for the
Waterworks.
Thank you, for Westchester
Right.
Waterworks, and we were the hosts for the dinner most recently, and we've been recipients of awards, and Steve has organized different workshops and presentations. I mean, you guys really are leaders in your field, and most of the people in Westchester and Ossining and even in the rest of village government may not realize how fortunate we are to have you, and thank you very much for seeing us through this latest ordeal, but for all that you do throughout the year. We really are incredibly fortunate, and I hope you feel appreciated. Maybe
We do.
can say that
Thank you.
enough.
Thank you for the support.
And with that, I know that we have a few things coming up. I think we should do like a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and probably skip to the capital planning so that we can get some of these folks home if they want. All good, Tom? All righty. So, Maddie, we decided we would shuffle things around a little bit. What's up next?
Yes, we are going to reorganize. Our Deputy Village Treasurer, Dale Ferreira, is going to join us for the next 2 items on the work session agenda. The first is the discussion on the 2020 capital plan to establish funding for a variety of capital projects and discuss some of the resolutions, all coming from the 2020 capital plan adopted by the board in December.
Good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees. Thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed resolutions for the 2020 capital projects that we would like to fund from surplus funds from 2019, which we had spoken about during our budget meetings back in November, many budget meetings with the departments, and for your consideration. So we offered a memo that will establish the different projects, ranging from vehicles and large equipment, some small equipment for the police department, and then some public improvements. So the total fund balance we're using is going to be $1,012,886 in total. The general fund portion is going to be $917,886. The water fund portion is going to be $86,000, and the sewer fund is going to be $9,000. So if you go to the first page, they are in detail. The police department, we have 3 marked, 1 unmarked police vehicle for $196,000. For the DPW department, we have a pickup truck for the maintenance department, a pickup truck for the highway foreman, and a pickup truck for the street maintenance. The building department has 2 fleet vehicles that are going to be electric or hybrid. The Parks Department has a dump truck with a plow. The Water Department has a SUV for administration that's going to be electric or hybrid. And the Water Department also has a utility truck for transmission and distribution. The Police Department's small equipment has the Axon body-worn cameras with the data storage and the live scan fingerprinting system. And then we have some public improvements on page 2, which is the firehouse generator for Hula Hose, the community center pool, which has sub-projects. Under that, we're just going to do one main project, but the sub-projects is going to be the pool roof repair, the pool resurfacing, and the spray pad resurfacing. And then additionally, we have park improvements. So we have Vets Park is the basketball surface, the pavilion roof and fencing. Snowden Park is the basketball service along with Nelson, and then paving at Nelson and Vets Park. So the portion of the general fund that we're using of fund balance is 917,886. The other smaller portion is water and sewer. And the detail of those budget adjustments is on page 3. So that's the actual in and outs for the general ledger accounts, as well as the project descriptions and the established budget for these projects.
Thank you. And I'll just, while people are reviewing this, this was emailed to us, but it's a little different when you see it in front of you and you actually have an opportunity to speak to our deputy treasurer. I forget that the public, if they are mostly just watching village board meetings, that they don't get to see you very often at village meetings. So welcome. We see you all the time, you know, on a day-to-day basis, and then every minute pretty much that we go through the budgets every November. So you're a very familiar face to us, but for folks watching at home, she's not a new person. She's just new to standing in front of the microphone.
I will be here 20 years, I think, on Friday.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So I guess I have
Started
to bring
when she was in
dessert, Jamie.
Yeah.
Apparently. I didn't know that rule existed.
All right. Well, happy
Conveniently.
anniversary. I guess I'm coming to Village Hall on
There you
Friday
go.
for the big party, Jamie. Does anybody have any questions? And if there, you did not point out any changes from what we discussed in
Right.
November.
These
so-
are exactly what we had spoken about during our many budget meetings and what everybody settled on and approved at that point. So that's what we're bringing forward to you for proposed resolution at the next legislative session next week.
I have a question.
Yeah.
First, thank you, Dale. Super helpful.
Welcome.
Sorry, your mic, please. Oh, thank you. First, thank you. It was very helpful of an overview. My question is about electric vehicles. When I'm a big fan of electric vehicles, I'm curious about not necessarily maintenance, but when you have an electric vehicle, you have to plug it in, and so how does that work as part of this? I don't see plug-ins
Right.
as part of that.
I'm going to defer to Paul a bit on that. We do have some plugins at the Armory, but he could probably speak better to the detail.
Hello again. I didn't really speak in detail to the building inspector's druthers on the vehicles there, but I have some idea that it's going to be used for the day-to-day code enforcement work. I don't think it's going to be used for anything other than that, and I also don't believe it's going to be a take-home vehicle. I think it's going to be on site. Therefore, with technology now and versus what it was a few years back, most of those are coming with power packs specific for that vehicle that you can plug into 220 somewhere if you create that at the workplace somewhere, which is easy for us to do because we have plenty of capacity at the operations center. So I'll talk to building and find out where the logical place to park those vehicles when they eventually get there, to supplement the 2 charging stations that we have there now, which are actually private/public charging stations, which are set on a pillar with a double charging cord. But the flexibility to charge into multiple places around the building could be afforded these 2 vehicles, but that's something when and if we'll figure out when we get it.
Thank you very much.
You seem to be leaning forward.
No, my question is, these are the same items at exactly the same price that we talked about, right? I'm
Right,
just having a
correct.
little problem with Vets Park and all that, with the paving of matching everything up, and I'm gonna take your word for it. I don't need to, look at it, but these are, the numbers are exactly the same. It's for this year. And I couldn't understand the 4 marked and unmarked SUV police vehicles. There was some conversation with previous trustees about what that means more, because 4 is that 2 and 2, 1 and 3, and are they those ghost things, whatever the heck
Right.
those are? Do you
It's-
know anything about that, or?
I know when we had discussed
Mm-hmm.
it during the meetings, it's 3 marked, 1 unmarked, but it was not, the unmarked was not going to be another ghost, so to
Okay,
speak.
all right, so it's everything exactly the way we said it. Okay, so, and I'm glad they're doing some work on paving and all that, because that's been long overdue, and I'm glad that we're moving to electric, because I feel like we haven't done a lot of that. And Paul is right, I mean, we have 2 and I guess 1 hybrid, but they go into, you can plug them into the wall right here, and they don't eat up very much electricity, so I think it's gonna be great.
Great.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I'm good.
Any other questions? All right. So we'll have a resolution on the agenda next week.
Mhm.
Okay,
Thank you, Dale.
thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
We have something else here?
Underneath that, they are going to prepare bond resolutions for your consideration for the February 5th legislative session for the 6-wheel dump truck with plow, spreader and controller, the 2 4x4 mason dump trucks with plow, and the bucket utility truck. So that is just coming down the pipe. So just for your consideration there as well. Other items, we are not going to bring forward for a bond resolution yet because one of them is currently being bid, so we don't have a real price point on it yet. Others were, people wanted to discuss more, we believe, like the urban soccer complex, especially in consideration with the town and what their experience is or going to be with their complex.
You don't have
so
to look at
speak.
her anymore. Doesn't represent the town anymore.
Village, she's a village person now.
As well as the parking meter project. We don't want to jump too far ahead of that yet before we know where we're going and what the cost is actually going to be. But they will be coming to visit shortly, I'm sure. So, forewarned.
Okay.
Additionally, we're going to also create the 2020 paving project, which also included a transfer from fund balance from 2019 surplus of $450,000. We have CHIPS funding anticipated of $400,000. And then, as Paul had spoken briefly about earlier, the multimodal grant of $150,000. So that project for total paving is going to be $1 million for 2020. So, I don't know.
$1 million for paving?
You remember what it was last year?
It's tough to spend that much. That's a lot of work.
Oh, it is, but just to.
You want to get on the mic?
Well, what was the last year before he gets on the, while he walks over? Dale?
Last year's project budget right now is up to $717,612.88.
Okay.
Of which we have a balance left at this point, which we will then transfer to this project as well, of $193,932.08.
So all told, from 18 and 19, because we did a lot of work at the end of 18 to try to follow, we were following Con Ed around the village for such a long time. We actually, and we didn't do a lot of the roads that we said we were going to do with the original budget, because Con Ed ended up doing those, so we did the other ones with the money that we have left over. I think we spent about 1.3 or 1.4 million at the end of 18 and then into 19. And then Con Ed, if you use their unit pricing, because we paid for a very small portion of that work that they did, so it was contiguous, so we didn't have patchwork around the Camp Woods area. Con Ed probably did what would have cost us about another $400,000. So that was, that was their offering for 2 years of, upset. So, and we still have some roads that, we're bringing forth sooner than later to say what, we'd like to do this summer.
Great.
Well, I know what you're going to,
Oh,
I'm
and we
just waiting
also
for you
did,
to ask. So.
We also did about what amounted after the curbs and the ADA ramps and the paving. We did about $100,000, maybe $110,000 worth of road improvements on Broadway, under the budget of the Broadway Bridge, because that project was a little under budget. So we did it within that capital project and built it there. So I kept it out of the.
That's terrific.
Yeah,
That's more than I realized.
So, I asked this question when we're going, I guess to you, Paul. I asked this question last year when we were going over through the budgets and, the improvements and how much work we actually, the time and the money that we spend fixing the sidewalks, doing the streets, doing the markings on the streets. And then we have Con Ed come in, removing the poles and leaving holes in there in our brand new sidewalks. How do we fix that? How do we coordinate with Con Ed a better path to take care of this? Because there's a bunch of holes on Spring Street, Broad Avenue, around Nelson Park, and along pretty much all the streets, even State Street. There's some areas. The Upper Croton, there are some holes in there. So how do we fix this and how do we prevent this? Because at some point that becomes a liability to the village. Because if someone trips and hurt themselves, they're not going to go to Con Ed. They're going to come to us. That's one. The other one is, so how do we fix the issue where a brand new pavement, and just educate me on this, when they do the striping on the sidewalks, what is the warranty on the paint if within less than 6 months, there's no paint anymore? How does that work? Who do we go back to that?
Be more specific. Striping on sidewalks. What do you mean by that?
The cross from one sidewalk to
crosswalks.
another, the crosswalks patch.
Yeah.
You know, the paint that we do that, the stripes. What is the warranty on this? Because that's an outside contractor that comes in and does the work for us. So how do we go back to them when less than 6 months, there's no lines, there's no visible lines in here?
Well, point those out specifically to me, because the ones we've done on the roads that we've paved, we've been using thermoplastic, and we've had very positive results for there. And the thermoplastic has been, it looks almost as good as it looked from 3-4 years ago when we first put it in. So
Little Broad Avenue, Spring Street, State Street areas.
yep,
that we
those
have
are
done.
roads that we're probably painting in-house with line painting, and we try to do it every year.
Lafayette,
Again, I'd have to look what's thermoplastic and what was painted in-house.
Lafayette
with
was
regular
done
paint.
last year. Ryan knew pretty much the whole strip of Lafayette, and you can barely see the lines in there.
Again, I have to see what was.
But what is the warranty on something like this? Can the contractor is like liable to come back and repaint?
On thermoplastic, he has. We call him back if it comes up. If it's something that we rip up with our plows, which doesn't really happen often, but sometimes it does, then we just have to overlay it because that was based on
So can we
maintenance damage.
can talk offline about that? Kind of, how do we
Yeah.
go about going? I know you guys do a great job doing the striping. The spring kind of summertime. I see you guys all over the place doing that stuff. I'm just curious to see what kind of what is the durability on projects like this. More interesting to me, besides that, obviously, is the sidewalks and Con Ed and coordination with that and what is going on, because I still see double poles next to each other. I still see a lot of holes in there and the cracks, and we haven't had a bad winter just yet, but water entering the coal, I'm freezing back, it start, and that becomes again, and if it's in a private property, we passed a law last year where it says the owner is responsible for maintaining the sidewalk. So that also
Yeah.
comes to how do we deal with this?
All right, you covered a few things there, and I'll give Stuart authorization to kick me if I misspeak from the legal perspective. But with regard to Con Ed work and the double pole issues, that's the relationship with Con Ed, I will say, is based on communication, and that's a never-ending effort. And I'm going to say, without giving numbers, I'm going to say that it's better than it was. We are in touch constantly with our liaison, with our construction managers, our inspectors, and the more and more we develop that rapport, the more beneficial and the more positive feedback and response we get from them. They did a lot of work for us on that Broadway Bridge project, under their dime, that really helped us keep the cost out of the construction, and at the same time ended with a more aesthetically pleasing view of the double arches, more specifically removal of all that overhead lines that used to exist there for years. They buried all of them for us, right? So that's based on relationships. So it's getting better. With regard to double pole issues, that's becomes a little bit of a bureaucratic issue because the poles are sometimes owned by Verizon, the poles are sometimes owned by Con Ed, and sometimes no one has the documented ownership of the poles. So when they come in and they do that storm hardening program that they've been doing for the last few years, if you've seen, they do a lot of tree pruning and cutting, and they've done a lot of installation of the taller, thicker utility poles versus the old ones that were put there, and probably a lot of them in the late 20s and the 30s and the 40s, maybe the 1950s. A lot of those poles are now replaced with much. I think they're about 6 feet taller, and the diameter on the pole is thicker. And they did that to be more resistant to tree fall and wind and what have you. But what Con Ed does is they only take their primary feeds and they run those on those poles. And a lot of the times they chop the other pole and leave the Verizon and Altice lines on the old pole. And until Verizon and Altice comes and moves to the other pole, you can't take that pole out. So believe me, I'm just as frustrated as you when you see a broken pole replaced or a cut pole or a floating pole or a pole with no bottom, it's
What
floating
about
in the
a
air.
leaning pole?
Leading pole, same thing. And we call them in, so that you're all going full circle to your question, from the liability perspective, Con Ed works in the right of way just like we work in the right of way, right? Like the big leaning pole that we've called on numerous times is in a DOT. It's on Route 9, right, by bottom of Cedar Lane. And it has a transformer on it, and we've called it in, and we made record of the call.
Yeah, I have the picture right here.
Yeah, so we have that all, we have our call on record, but we can't make them do that by court order. We just bring it to their attention and document that we brought it to their attention multiple times, and hopefully it gets handled on their list. With regard to the work that they do on the poles, our paving, or any of the restoration work that they do when they're running services to house on the concrete, on the sidewalk, when they come into the village, they send us their work plan. We take that work plan and append it to our street opening permit, which has a fee associated with it, which we base on their underground work, based on the fees that we bill any contractor that wants to excavate in the right of way. And we send that back. We only approve it when we get a check. So roughly speaking, you might be able to answer better, Dale. I think in 2019 alone, we received almost $50,000 just in permit fees from Con Ed that we process out of our office, plus or minus. Just in 2019 alone. In 2018, I'm sure it was more than that, because they dug up the entire camp boards, and they pay permit fees based on footage under the ground for all of that work. So we do have a revenue stream there too. And when they pull out that permit, just like any contractor that works in the right of way, they are required to present workers' comp and liability insurance for the contractor doing the work with us and anybody associated with Con Ed as additionally insured. And that permit stays open until they do all the restoration work, at which point we won't release any of the bond or any of the permit closing documents, because we want to keep everything intact with the insurance. So if there is a trip and fall or some type of accident associated with their workmanship, until we close out their permit, we simply direct the attorneys to Con Edison.
So that's fine. What about when they come in and remove the poles after Verizon and Otis have removed the lines? What happens then?
They're doing it in front of Seatown right now, right? Seatown was a double pole for the longest time, and they had the barrels around there, and
Do they pull a permit and all that stuff is taken care
Oh,
of?
yeah,
that
that's
time?
all- that's
But that's what
all-
I'm saying. So
Yeah.
part of that. So why can they be responsible? Because right now, a hole with just a little bit of gravel, is that repairing what there was there?
No,
So,
but the permit's
again,
still open.
So, but then how do we go back? And so if the hole has been there for, I want to say 6 months, let's say. They haven't done anything. They removed the pole. So how do we go back? Do we go back and patch ourselves?
no.
Or we have, so
No.
how do we hold them responsible for that?
We never take ownership of it, right? Because that would expose us to the liability.
Right.
So what we do is we draw their attention. If we have to, we will cordon it off. So, if there's a public health and safety issue, we will either plate it or put horses or barrels over it and then call them and say, you need to address this. But it stays open until they fix it. The biggest workaround with Con Ed is their bureaucracy, all right? Because the person who pulls the pole or puts a new pole in is not the same group that transfers the power over to the new pole, which is not the same person that pulls the old power lines down, which is a different group that comes and pulls the old pole out. It goes on and on and on.
No, I get all that stuff. I
Yeah.
see it all the time. Believe me, even just to remove a cable from a TV is a big deal for them. It is true. But, it goes back to, so how do we, because I know, it's like if you don't walk the sidewalks, if you don't walk the village, you won't see that while you're driving. Sure. So how do we become aware of the situation, of the problem that we are having?
So
Again,
we know where they're working. We do walk around a lot. We drive around a lot, and every year we send emails saying these items are still open, and it's a long list. Unrestored trench on Croton Avenue. Sidewalk repair necessary for removed pole on Dale Avenue, and we send the whole list to our liaison, our Con Ed construction manager representative liaison. Sometimes we have a rapport with the subcontractors, depending on who they are, like the paver or the concrete contractor, and we'll send it directly to them. And sometimes if they're in here, they will go fix it, because they all have to get paid and they have to itemize what they get paid, and they can only fix what Con Ed authorizes them to fix. Sometimes it's left unrestored, like trenches or plates in the road, not because they just haven't gotten around to restoring it yet, because they're not sure, because engineering hasn't told them if they still have to go in the ground and continue the work. You know, and engineering isn't always talking to field services. So, yeah, it's all about communication and relationships, and it's getting better, but it's a tough nut. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Okay. We'll continue that conversation.
And what we go through here in Ossining is pervasive everywhere. Everywhere Con Ed is. I have my counterparts in other municipalities that go through the same exact thing.
Okay.
Done? Finished?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not really, but yeah.
No, I understand, for now. I mean, it's a work session, so it's I think, interesting. I just noticed that we talk a lot about paving. I think I asked this during the budget meeting, and honestly, I don't know where we ended up. So sidewalks, and I'm not talking about the Con Ed part, that's a separate So a lot of our not a lot, I shouldn't say that. I know some of them need a little bit work. Where in the budget is sidewalks versus paving? And curbs, those curb things also.
A while back, we used to have sidewalks and concrete work. Some of it was an operating budget. Most of it was in a capital request, and it was separate from paving. But because anything you do in the right of way, from the curbs in,
Right.
it could be drainage work. As long as it's in the right of way, you can use CHIPS funding to offset the cost. You could send in that work to the state to get reimbursed on that
Okay.
CHIPS grant that we get every year. And like Dale said, I think it's going to be a 400 because some of it was a carryover. We usually get about $250,000 to $300,000 a year, and then that's supplemented with the governor had started 5 years ago a supplement to CHIPS money, which was called Pave New York, and that's usually about another $50,000 to $60,000. It's all proportionate to your muni, right? So we get about 50 or 60,000, and then we also get extreme winter weather recovery money, EWRs. Something, and that's usually another $40,000 or $50,000 every year because they look back and they say, well, how was your winter and how will your roads be after that winter, and they give us extra money. So it's so I know I digressed
That's the
a little
budget.
bit.
So
Right.
I think you answered the part of my questions related to budget, but I don't
But the
think-
sidewalk work is, so what we did was we pulled everything under one, about 5 years ago, we created a rolling capital project. And we put the sidewalk, curb, and paving work all under one, what you see now, capital paving. So it's all in there, so we don't have it spread out, and it's easier to track this way. It's a little more transparent, so we're not pulling something out of somewhere else. The sidewalk used to be separate. I think the reason they probably started that because a lot of the sidewalk work that used to get done was separated because we used to use it as a holding line for assessment, right? So we used to assess a lot of the work, pay for it with the capital borrow, but then pay it back with the assessment revenue to the homeowners. And the assessment is something that we do per village code because under, I don't know the section, Stuart, but the assessment is something that you levy against the property owner for the sidewalk in front of their house because that's their responsibility to maintain it if the defect was not caused by utility work or something that the village or another entity would have caused, i.e. water main work or water service work where we compromise someone's sidewalk. We would not assess work like that. But it's all together. And the reason we started doing that is because we started getting a lot of grant money to do sidewalk work, which is the way we like to do it now because most of the grants we get and the sidewalk work that will take place next year is the CDBG sidewalk work, which is primarily going to be some of the areas that have no sidewalk at all in the village, like some places I'm going to say around the Ellis Place area still have flagstone in front of their house. A lot of those areas that have that don't have ADA compliant ramps or crosswalks at the intersections of those older neighborhoods, all around like Spring and some of those areas down there where we haven't done a lot of sidewalk work. That's what the CDBG award was for, that the village received for the 20 to 23 cycle. And when you get grant money for that sidewalk work, one of the one of the facets of that grant award is that you can't double dip and also take money from the property owner and assess them. So you can't get money to do the sidewalk and then get money to do the same sidewalk from the property owner. So it's nicer because it's, you know, it's not really impacting the residents, and it's nice for anybody that walks in that area, particularly with the ADA compliance and the new sidewalks. So that's something in 2021 that we're going to scope and design in 20.
Okay, wow, that was a more in-depth conversation about sidewalks than I anticipated for just a
Oh, we got a lot of questions.
budget
Capital
transfer.
project. Sorry, Dale, thank you,
It's
Paul.
okay. I mean, on the list
I can
of
go all
things that
day.
we get asked about, paving is very high on the list.
Yeah,
We talked a
actually
lot
it
about
is.
water. That's the topic of the day. But paving is something that we hear about all the time, and this is, you know, pothole season, so we hear about that in another way. Okay. Any more questions about this particular? And Dale, I just wanted to go back. There were a couple of items that you said are going to be on our February 5th agenda, but they're not going to be ready for next week because we do have a legislative session next week on the
Right.
22nd.
No, we need to get the bond resolutions
Yeah.
from bond council first.
You're going to be at the February 5th meeting, right?
Well, yeah.
Because I'm not, so you get to be.
Oh,
you get to
that's
sit
why
in
you
the
were
big kid
asking?
chair. That's why I was.
No, I'm actually checking. Yeah.
Okay, good. All righty. So, please join us, Andy.
Couple things. Just, we talk about capital projects. One capital project that we do in-house is we change out the lead service lines throughout the village. And right now, we're down to about 200 lead services that need to be replaced. We do about 50 a year. And the cost is about 150,000 we take out of the operating budget. So it's kind of important for the public to know that.
Can you explain what that means, Andy?
What it means is basically the customer owns the service from the valve that's either on their curb or in the street into their house. So, and the village owns from the main to the valve. So we know that there's 200 existing services throughout the village, and we're pretty aggressive where we're not waiting for the health department or the EPA to come to us and say, change these out. We have a lead and copper program where we're testing for the EPA, and we haven't failed the 90th percentile. We've been within the limits of what we're supposed to be. But it's just good common practice to change out lead services if you know that it could be a hazard to the public. So we're doing that pretty aggressively. So I want to make sure we said that. And then,
Sorry, so pretty much you're changing from the main to the valve.
correct.
So what happens if from the valve to the house is like,
We inspect it, and if it's a lot of them have been changed to copper on their own, like as houses have been upgraded or people have new services. But if we see that it's a lead service there, we let them know and we suggest to them that they change it. We can't make them do it, and then we give them a list of qualified contractors that can do it, because we're not allowed to work on private property. So that's always encouraged. In the next few weeks, I just wanted to mention proposals. The tank job for the 3 tanks that we're putting the remediation systems in, that'll be going out to bid in the beginning of February. We had a contract with Hazen and Sawyer to design and get the design approved by the health department and help us bid it. But now the next step is I'm asking them for a proposal to review the shop drawings when the project's going on, and any requests for information. I am looking for a proposal from another local company to do the construction management with us, because it just doesn't make good sense to pay a company out of Manhattan to come up here and be on site often with the contractor. So there'll be 2 separate proposals for that. Obviously, the proposal from Arcadis for the existing plant. So any questions when they come up, you can reach out for me. But it's we want to move fast with everything, so, and we can do it. Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Dale, anything else that we should know that you didn't cover yet?
There were just 2 cleanup budget adjustments as well that will be on for a resolution, just so we can clean them up and close out the projects and get them off our books, basically. Um,
Are they identified on this? that you're
Yes,
referring to?
they're at on the bottom of the second page and on the last page. So we have $1,496.51 to fund the 2016 fire pumper, because when we actually went out, the project was originally $675,000. We didn't need that full amount, so we only bonded for $650,000, but the total expenses were $651,496.51. So we have to cover that small piece. And similar situation with the 2016 street paving. We had actually moved the balance to the 2017 paving project, but there was $100 too much moved, so now we just have to cover that, and then we can close it.
$100?
Happens.
I
I think that might be a new record there. Okay.
It does happen.
All right, thank
Are we
you.
going to speak on the,
Certiorari, what?
yeah, the search warrant?
Yep, we can do that
Let's
next.
do that, yeah.
Combine.
Go for it.
So we were served for J&J Main Street LLC, which is 95 to 97 Main Street, for a tax certiorari refund. The refund actually covered the tax years of 2013 to 2018. But the interesting one with this is that for 2013, there was no reduction given. 2014, they have a dollar refund reduction of 1523.28. 2015, they have a dollar reduction of 3069.80. And then 16, 17, and 18, no reduction. So their total refund amount is going to be $4,593.08.
That's on Upper Main Street?
9597.
Yeah. It's the one that is being renovated right now?
That I'm not sure.
Was it the old auto parts store?
No, that's 125.
It's farther down.
All right, just trying to figure out what it is. And we don't really have a say in the certioraries. It's a perfunctory vote. It comes to us out of process, but we don't get to say no, so.
Unfortunately, no.
We have to give them their money back. It's already
Yeah.
been decided, so,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you, though.
Great. Any questions? I'm good.
Good.
All right.
Well, thanks for
Dale.
joining us here tonight, Dale.
Thank you
It's
very
been
much.
lovely. All righty, so,
What do we got?
Stupert.
Good evening, folks. We have two cabaret licenses that are ready for approval. Both were licenses that have previously been granted. The first is for 3 Westerly. And it will be for Sunday through Saturday, 7 days a week, from noon till 2 a.m. The second is for Good Choice Kitchen, which is Monday through Saturday from noon to 10 p.m. Both have been received approvals from police and building departments.
Great, and so they'll be on as resolutions for next week? Good, glad to see the cabaret license holders are coming through. Alrighty. Is there anything else for the televised portion of our meeting that's not on the agenda that were last-minute additions? All right, then,
Yeah, I have something.
okay.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I just want to share with you all. I went to a NICOM training recently.
yes. Mhm.
And it was very interesting. I learned a lot, and it brought up a number of questions that I'm pursuing to see how many of these issues make sense to track down. Some that I want to raise. One is sexual harassment prevention training. This is something that everyone that is a village employee completes, and all public officers are also supposed to complete. We serve as public officers. Folks that sit on boards like the zoning board of appeals are also public officers, and so there's a question about whether they should also complete sexual harassment prevention training. They are making decisions on behalf of the village, and it would behoove us for them to complete it. That is NICOM's recommendation. I would love to present it to you all to get your thoughts. Not necessarily at this very second, but that's one of the topics. 2 is cybersecurity. There are all kinds of headlines right now about the election, but there are larger and smaller everyday ransomware and phishing and other kinds of cybersecurity issues that come up that affect municipalities and could impact us not only in terms of our finances, but also personal information and those kinds of things. And a number of smaller items, utility reviews and different things. So there were a lot of little details that were interesting that came up that have also prompted conversations with folks around the village. So that was it. That's the report.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you were able to go to that NICOM training. NICOM is one of the really great resources that we have, and that one-day training. It's designed for new elected officials, but I think I went like 4 years ago, so I'd already been in office for a few years, just because I really like John Mancini. I think was doing it the day that I was there, and he's the general counsel. It's really terrific, and it's also a great opportunity to meet your counterparts in other municipalities. There's great value in getting to know how things work in other communities, and it's often surprisingly different in interesting ways. So thank you, and I know that you've been following up with staff to try and see what is our current policy and what makes sense. And the sexual harassment training is a new regulation. It changed with New York State in the last year. I had never been expected to participate. I participated in my first one last year, and I know we were all invited to be able to participate. And and now that you guys are on board, I trust that the next time that it's offered, we will be incorporated into that again. Good. Maddie, do you have anything to add on that?
I was just going to put my town hat back on for just a brief second. We actually did that last year. The regulation went into effect in October of 2019, and I know that the village had hired a contractor, I think, and did the training in person. We had a difficult time complying with that, so we actually went through our insurance company, and there are several different companies that have worked with New York State to make sure that they have the training down that actually do it online. So we had all of our planning, zoning, EAC members. We gave them a login. We said you have 3 weeks, get it done. They printed out the certificate, sent it to me, and it was very easy for them to do either at home or at their work. So I can certainly help you out with digging that up.
Thank you.
Great.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Maddie. You don't have to forget everything you learned in the town. In fact, we hope you don't. Thank you. Unless there's something else, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn to executive session for matters related to pending litigation and personnel related to specific persons.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And with that, I say thank you very much. Please join us next week for our legislative session, which will be back at the courthouse on Spring Street at 7:30, our usual time. This meeting is adjourned to executive session.